morning, everybody. It feels so glorious to have the doors open and a little breeze and the outside and inside coming together. So we're so delighted that you're here this morning. I am Katie. I am the pastor right now at Salt House. When Sean was saying that, it reminded me years ago in my first congregation, I was introducing a speaker, a woman who was a pastor who happened to be married to the person who was the bishop at the time. And I wanted to say, our speaker today is the wife of our current bishop. And I accidentally said, our speaker today is the current wife of the bishop. Same words. So I'm the current pastor of Salt House. Anyway. So we're going to start today by dismissing the kids to go to Salt House Kids. Miss Madeline's right there. And we're excited for you guys to get to experience some fun stuff today and to learn a little bit more about how much God loves you and how you love the world. And they're going to have a good time. So look forward to seeing them again in a little bit. Sean and I are going to share today the scripture reading for this morning, which is a psalm. It is Psalm 136, and it has a very distinct pattern. And so, we're going to read it together. I invite you to, if you're comfortable, to close your eyes and listen to the pattern and the invitation of the psalm.
Psalm 136. Give thanks to the Lord, for he is good.
God's love endures forever.
Give thanks to the God of gods.
God's love endures forever.
Give thanks to the Lord of lords.
God's love endures forever.
To him who alone does great wonders.
God's love endures forever.
Who by God's understanding made the heavens.
God's love endures forever.
Who spread out the earth upon the waters.
God's love endures forever.
Who made the great lights.
God's love endures forever.
The sun to govern the day.
God's love endures forever.
The moon and stars to govern the night.
God's love endures forever.
To him who struck down the firstborn of Egypt.
God's love endures forever.
And brought Israel out from among them.
God's love endures forever.
With a mighty hand and outstretched arm.
God's love endures forever.
To him who divided the Red Sea asunder.
God's love endures forever.
And brought Israel through the midst of it.
God's love endures forever.
But swept Pharaoh and God's army into the Red Sea.
God's love endures forever.
To him who led God's people through the wilderness.
God's love endures forever.
To him who struck down great kings.
God's love endures forever.
And killed mighty kings.
God's love endures forever.
Sihon, king of the Amorites.
God's love endures forever.
And Og, king of Bashan.
God's love endures forever.
And gave their land as an inheritance.
God's love endures forever.
An inheritance to God's servant Israel.
God's love endures forever.
He remembered us in our low estate.
God's love endures forever.
And freed us from our enemies.
God's love endures forever.
He gives food to every creature.
God's love endures forever.
Give thanks to God of heaven.
God's love endures forever. Thanks. Some Bible passages have a pattern that's hard to hear or figure out. But Psalm 136 is definitely not one of those. You can't miss that pattern, no matter how hard you try, I guess. It's like an earworm. It's like that piece of the song that you can't let go of, that you wake up singing. It's the "Are we there yet?" of every car trip. It's the "Baby, you're a firework" of the psalm. The refrain of the psalm is simple and constant, and it goes on and on and on. You can't miss it. God's love endures forever. What's fascinating about the psalm, I think, is that refrain reoccurs every time, no matter what the previous part of the verse says. So as you heard it or watched it on the screen, it comes after things like, God who alone does great wonders, who created the sun and the moon and the stars, who gives food to all flesh, who rescued us from our foes. Yeah, after those great and amazing things, we say, God's love endures forever. And that makes some sense. I mean, God's love for us is more straightforward. It's probably easier to see or sense or affirm when things are good and going well. So, of course, the radical part of the psalm is that that persistent refrain still shows up even when the first part of the verse is not so great. God's love endures forever. When God is creating and building and speaking water and light and moon and stars into existence, but God's love also endures when all the firstborn of Egypt die, or in the 40 years of relative chaos wilderness wandering, day after day wondering where the next meal will come from, or the terror of walking through the Red Sea and hoping that nothing will change when you're in the middle of it, or the reality of trying to live in the promised land when you get there and realize, hey, it's already full of people. Where are we going to go? Reading the story that happens in those little tiny verses, the complexity and the messiness of the people of Israel and what they experience, and then reading the insistence that God's love endures forever. The act of saying that when everything is falling apart is, I think, the really radical, transformative part of this psalm. Now, I know that some of you have been reading with Heather and meeting at Heather and Gila's house to talk about Rob Bell's book, What is the Bible? And I've been reading it too. I finally had a chance to get into it this week. It's been really enjoyable. If you have a chance to read it, I recommend it. Lots to think about and talk about. And in one of the chapters, he writes about a particularly long and complex Greek word. So my little Bible nerd brain was like, ooh, look, long and complex Greek word. And when I read that chapter this week, it opened up this psalm for me in a new way. So here's the word. It's kind of a whopper. We're going to put it on the screen any minute now. And the pronunciation of this word is anakephaliosithai. I think. Anakephaliosithai. Lucky for us, it's ancient Greek. No one really speaks it anymore. So if we pronounce it incorrectly, it's not really a big deal. But there are parts of the word that have distinct meanings. So ana, the first part, means again. Kephale, in the middle there, you can see that, is head. And the remainder of the word tells us that it's a verb and what kind of verb it is. So it's usually translated something like to bring together, to unify, or to sum up. And most literally, it means to bring things under one head. This particular word comes from the book of Ephesians, where Paul is saying that in the fullness of time, Jesus will do this, anakephaliosithai, everything. Bring all things together, or bring all things under one head, or unify all things. So that's fine and good, and now you've learned an extra fancy Greek word that you can, good luck with Scrabble. Wouldn't that be a whopper? Yeah, that'd be great. But another way to translate this word or understand this word is to say that it means to recapitulate or retell something, to tell something over again. Maybe tell a story that's been told before, but bring new meaning or hear new meaning in the story. So Rob Bell, when he's talking about this word, he says it's like when you are telling the story of a particularly bad camping trip. The one where it rained the whole time, your tent got a hole in it, the raccoon got into your food, and you got a flat tire in your car. And frankly, the whole thing was awful. But when you tell the story later, things change. You tell the story, but all of a sudden, your car got 3 flat tires, right? And the tent got the biggest hole you've ever seen, and the raccoon was the size of a bear. And everything happened, but you're telling it and hearing it and understanding it in a different way. You don't leave out the bad parts, the icky parts, but you hear them differently when you're telling the story again with maybe a little bit of perspective. And that, according to Paul, is part of what God is up to in the world, retelling things. Not leaving out the bad parts or the good parts, but somehow helping us to re-see them, rehear them, retell them in a different way. And Paul insists that God is doing this with everything, all the things. broken things, broken relationships, poverty, racism, joy, fear, all things. God is involved in retelling everything. I think that's not just Rob Bell's invitation or even Paul's invitation. I think that's the invitation of Psalm 136. Can we retell things, our lives, in a way that helps us see and express how God's love endures forever? Even in the hard things, the worst things, the best things, the things that are still happening, that you're still in the middle of and you don't know whether they're good or bad. Is it possible for our stories to be retold in the light of the love of God that changes who we are and who we become? And if that's possible for us, how is it possible for our neighbors, our communities, our nation, and our world? That's what Psalm 136 is, I think. It's a retelling of Israel's story, but it invites us into a retelling of our own stories with that constant refrain, God's love endures forever. So rather than go on and on about this in the abstract, I think we'll try it. We're going to give everybody today your own psalm pattern. And by we, I mean Jason is going to give everybody today your own psalm pattern. You'll see that simple refrain, God's love endures forever. And then there is a blank part at the top for your own verses, your own story. So I want you to take a few minutes and think about how you can begin to retell your story. What is it that belongs in your psalm that can be seen then and told and experienced through the enduring love of God? And remember, it's not just the good stuff, and it's not just the bad stuff, it's all the stuff. All things. I have one last quick thing to say before you get started, or as you're thinking. And it's kind of a disclaimer or a cautionary note. Retelling our lives and seeing in them the enduring, steadfast love of God does not mean that hard things are not hard. I want to say really clearly, it does not mean that God made hard things happen in order to teach you some kind of lesson. Probably everybody has heard that phrase, God doesn't give you more than you can handle. First of all, that's not in the Bible. And people say it and they mean well, we'll give them credit for that, but it's not in the Bible. And secondly, the thing that is in the Bible that sounds kind of like that people think they're quoting, is specifically addressed to a community of people. So when Paul says that, he says, God will not give y'all more than y'all can handle. Nowhere in the Bible does it say that God is going to cause something to happen to you as an individual so that you can learn something or for some sort of testing purpose. That is not a thing. Seeing God's love at work through all the events of our lives does not mean that God wills hard things to happen to teach us something. No. However, affirming the love of God at work at all times can help us see how we are not alone in those times and how even those hard times can be transformed. So I want to invite you to take a few minutes to simply think for yourself, maybe write some notes, and then I'm going to invite you to talk to one or two people near you, and then gradually we'll bring this conversation, all of us together, just chatting and seeing where our psalms take us. So go ahead and start working on your own when you're ready to find someone to chat with. If you're a super introvert, just keep working on your own. That's cool too. We affirm the introverts here. And I'll just really interrupt you a handful of times and give you more instructions. All right? So let's go ahead and get working. moment to find somebody to talk to, or one or two people near you, go ahead and start doing that. And just kind of, as you're comfortable, talk about what's in your psalm. What are some of the circumstances that it's been maybe easier for you to see or affirm the love of God, and where has it been harder? And I'll leave that comfort level to you, but I invite you to start having a conversation with somebody as you're comfortable doing so. Comfortable sharing with a larger group some of what you said or heard. I'll invite you just to share your own story at the moment, and if you think your neighbor had something great to say, you can say, you should share that. But let them, actually do that. And if you want to share some of what you heard,
come up here if they want.
you can come up here, yeah,
Or
we
just
can
raise your hand.
raise your hand. And Karen?
Actually, I think one of the most interesting is Pastor Katie and I were talking, and there are things in the past, and looking back to the past, to things that have happened, things in the current time frame that you're addressing right now, and things that you know that are going to be in the future, and trying to figure out how best to address those. So it's kind of a balance.
Yeah, so that's one of the questions that maybe comes up is, you know, in the psalm, these are all things that are past. And people are looking back and saying, I affirm and that God's love endures forever. How does that impact the way we're experiencing the messy circumstances that we live in now? It's less clear maybe, but how can that change the way we experience the now? Yeah, and not just reinterpret the past. Yeah, Levi.
I like to look at it like how plants grow. They need to be stressed out in order to establish and grow stronger. Like a tree, if it has support on its trunk for too long, it'll blow over in the winds if you take the support off. And I feel like having those hard times is really important in order for us to become stronger and use that for the future.
That's really helpful. Thanks. I think about that perspective. I am not a gardener in our family. My spouse does the gardening, but he's always talking about that related to tomatoes. That tomatoes have to have a certain amount of stress or they don't produce the fruit. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, Peter.
Just going through life and experiencing all the difficult, the hardship, the blessings, and sometimes we don't understand them until we start reading about God, learning about God, and understanding His ways. And it teaches you throughout life that regardless what the circumstances are, God is always there.
Yeah, I hope that's one of the reasons that we read and learn and struggle with the stories of the Bible, is that they give us this pattern of seeing that at work. Yeah.
When we lose a loved one, a lot of times we don't understand why did it happen to him.
Yeah.
And just understanding not the way how God works, understanding the Bible, why things happen, they happen, and a lot of times you don't understand it because it says later on that the chapter will be open and you find out the explanation later on.
Yeah, a lot of questions. We live with a lot of questions. Yeah. Thanks. Yeah, Tim.
To just kind of add to that, I think it speaks to our human nature of questioning whether it still will be good in the end, even though in the past it's always ended up that way, right? So everything's cycling, and even though we know it'll be better, there's still that question in the back of our mind of, is it different this time?
Yeah. Yeah.
Can I just read mine?
Yeah, sure. That'd be great. Can you come up here and read it, Michael, so we can hear? That'd be great. Just you can use that mic.
Because you're taller. Okay. I got to start out by saying I'm glad my wife and kids are not here. They're on vacation in Idaho without me, which is a good thing. And you know, my family's just been going to counseling, and one of the things the counselor had said was, you know, you guys are looking at an avalanche of problems, any one of which alone would just destroy any marriage. And so, I mean, I feel like if anybody knows me, it's like I feel like the past 2 years of my life have been like the most, I was gonna say the worst ever, but probably the most challenging ever is a more optimistic way to say it. So the Katy Perry thing made an impression on me, so this was very, very easy for me to write. Okay. Things can always get worse.
God's love
Endures forever.
The outside world attacked my family.
God's love endures forever.
I hurt the people I love the most.
God's love endures forever.
They hurt me back even worse.
God's love endures forever.
I know that Jesus heals broken hearts.
God's love endures forever.
I have reasons to believe things will work out okay.
God's love endures forever.
There are reasons why I can live with things I can't control.
God's love endures forever.
Nothing can separate me from your love.
God's love endures forever.
I'm rebuilding, sometimes slowly, sometimes quickly.
God's love endures forever.
Things can always get better.
God's love endures forever. Thank you, Michael. Yeah. Part of what I really appreciate about both your sharing and what happened there is the power of a community to say to you, God's love endures forever, when sometimes we cannot say that for or to ourselves. And so I want to encourage you to take the psalm that you've created or are creating with you this week. And there will be days when you can say confidently, God's love endures forever. And there will be days when you will need that voice of Salt House that just happened in your head to remind you, God's love endures forever. And we're going to sing a song together that follows a similar sort of pattern that affirms over and over again our need for concrete ways to experience God's love. This is a hymn called Give Me Jesus. And in a similar way, it follows the circumstances of a life. And it says to us, in all things, God, give me this incarnation of your love. Give me Jesus. I invite us to sing that together.